Welcome to session 3 of Conscious Discipline. Today is our last session that we have in the introduction overview of Conscious Discipline. Starting next time that we meet together for session 4, we'll start to really dive into those different parts of the brain state where we can really talk about the skills and the powers that align with all of these brain states. So today is the last session where we talk a lot about just that introductory level. So today we're going to cover the connected school family, and we're going to talk about just the power of how important the connection piece is that we've kind of been building upon. So in this session, you're going to discuss, what we're going to discuss is the shift from the factory model of education with the goal of creating that school culture, that compassionate school culture that we've been kind of building those skills upon our knowledge for the past 2 sessions. We know that conscious discipline integrates, yes, it's trauma informed, it's research based, and it integrates the safe, connected home piece, a safe environment for kids where they feel safe, where they feel connected so that they can problem solve. That's the optimal, that's the goal, to have that intrinsic motivation for kids to be successful in life. So before we get started, this is a little breathing icon, a breathing strategy that we teach through Conscious Discipline is one of the structures that we use. And this is what we call the pretzel. So there are 2 ways, two different, I guess, fun, creative ways that you can teach the pretzel. For kids who have difficulty doing what we call the hard pretzel versus the soft pretzel, you can give them 2 options. So I'll show you both. So this version is the hard pretzel. And before we get started, we know why it's so important to continue on with our breathing and why. What does that do for us? Well, it resets the brain, obviously. It causes us to shut off that fight or flight. That changes our perception, sends us into more of a calming, and kind of gets us ready for learning and gets us ready for our day. So I thought this would be helpful and a cool little fun little teaching thing that you can use even for not only for yourself, but in your future classrooms. So with the hard pretzel, we teach kids to have their hands out. We're going to do a little crisscross move here. Bring our hands in, put our thumb on our chin, breathe in through your nose, and breathe out. Let's do that one more time. Breathe in and breathe out. And for children who have difficulty crossing their hands, I know even for us adults that's hard to follow, you can always offer the soft pretzel where you just have hands place their hands crisscross over their chest. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, how do you feel, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, I know that I feel better. I feel more calm. I feel relaxed, and I'm ready to continue on with this training. Just a little pre-learning survey before we get started. Let me hear your thoughts on this. Just as we've done before in our past sessions, we've rated on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being strongly agree, and 1 being strongly disagree. Noticing connects us, while judgment disconnects us. What are your thoughts? I know I've mentioned the last couple of sessions just kind of jotting down on a piece of paper on a scale of 1 to 5, or numbering 1 to 5, and then rating each question just to kind of see where your knowledge base is at the very end. External motivators are helpful in permanently changing behavior. What are your thoughts about that? Okay, number 3, rituals soothe lower centers of the brain. And this refers to the I love you rituals that we've been kind of talking about the last 2 sessions that bring in those elements of connection. Rituals soothe lower centers of the brain. Noticing language, this is number 4. Noticing language sounds like this. I noticed you picked up the blocks. That was helpful. 5 being strongly agree, 4 being agree, 3 being in the middle, 2 being disagree, and 1 being strongly disagree. And the last question, intrinsic motivation is the only means for achieving lifelong learning and healthy values. Intrinsic motivation is the only means for achieving lifelong learning and healthy values. Okay. So we keep talking about this compassionate culture and trying to understand, what all this means and the importance of that. And so where I want to take you that so you can get that mindset, you want to look in, as future educators, having a classroom of your own, having a vision of what type of culture that you want in your classroom. I know, and I've talked about this before, when I had my classroom a long time ago, I had a little bit of a compassionate culture as far as the warm and the positivity, the positive climate, but the culture in the room wasn't so good. It was toxic, and that was because I was living in a toxic world, and therefore my classroom was toxic. A lot of behaviors I viewed a little bit differently, as if I were in a classroom now, I would view them in more of the conscious discipline lens, but thinking about that compassionate culture. So here's where I want to take you. I want you to think about what type of culture you desire to have. And I want you to think about the culture that you have at home, the culture I mentioned, what kind of classroom would you like to have? What kind of culture would you like to cultivate just in relationships that you have, just adult relationships, whether intimate or not? What kind of culture do you want and desire to have? What we do know is that a relaxed, alert state is the optimal state of being. So we know that it's a state of high challenge and low stress. So going back to that toxic classroom that I had, that really wasn't where I was. It was always high stress. But we know that a relaxed internal state is where we can all optimally learn, not only the children, but myself also, because we will talk, and we've mentioned before that my state dictates certain behaviors. And so that's the integrity of this program. It starts with the adult first. You have a big to do as a teacher in a classroom to build that compassionate culture. So we're going to talk a lot about that today on how to do it. Where do we even start? Let's go back to when you guys were in school. Let's think about, reflect on your early experiences in education. What type of culture did you experience in school? I know for me, it was very competitive. There wasn't a lot of compassion. Cliques were a thing. How many of you all can relate? They're a thing, and they're always going to be around. Even in early childhood, there are cliques. And then, what's that look like when you go off to middle school and high school? It's, the jocks hang out with the jocks, and the cheerleaders hang out with the cheerleaders, and the nerds hang with the nerds. And, even though the language and terminology is different now to this day, but think about what that was like, reflect back on what that was like. And we live in a world where it is based on competition, who socioeconomic status is better than the other versus who wears this and who doesn't wear this, or who's smart and who's not smart. But really the ultimate goal is we want to cultivate an environment that has compassion. So just kind of reflect back on your early experiences in education, and take it a step further and think about the educators that you had, your leaders in the classroom, your teachers. What kind of culture did they cultivate? So just take that time to reflect. What we do know is that conscious discipline is built on 2 core principles. We want a healthy home family and a healthy school family. We talk a lot. I do a lot of parenting trainings, and we talk a lot about how can we take these structures that we're teaching early child, or if we're teaching providers and teachers, how to use these structures in the classroom, we're also saying, hey, you can also take these skills and use them at home. There's a beautiful parent curriculum that's out, that's available now. It's only been out for a couple years. It's pretty fresh, but it involves all kinds of ways to integrate these skills within the home through book series. And you can also use these in your classroom. This right now is that I'm holding is the Sophie collection that's available through Conscious Discipline. The Schubert collection is more for classroom school age children, where the Sophie, which is the younger sibling of Schubert, is more for early childhood, just because they're the board-based books. So that is an example of a structure or something that you can use in the home or in the classroom to cultivate that compassionate culture. And number two, we know that it's built on intrinsic motivation that we've already been talking about to achieve lifelong learning. We can't expect children to learn if they're operating not on the prefrontal lobe of their brain. If you have a child who's experienced trauma or a child who is disengaged and not connected, then we cannot expect them to operate using all those executive skills if they're experiencing these things. Okay, so we think about like a disconnected child is a child who's disengaged. Okay, so if you think about a child who's not really there emotionally or socially, then we know that there are skills that we have to build upon so that we can cultivate that optimal brain development to help them, right? To encourage them to use their brain, right? And so if we're not meeting the safety need, the safety piece first, if we're not going to the emotional state to let them know that they're loved and connected, then we can't expect them to know to know how to use their executive functioning skills. So how do we do that? How in the world do we create a compassionate culture? Well, in our classrooms or at home, we start with a new job description. I love talking about this because I really feel like it really, I can relate to it as a parent. I can relate to it as an educator. But starting with a new job description, when you're thinking about going into a classroom and already changing your job description to my job is to keep you safe, right? Then you know right away that number one goal is to establish safety in the room. A child who, goes beyond, a child, not specifically a child who gets hurt on the playground. You want to create that sense of safety, right? It goes beyond that. It's that child who's maybe having conflict with another child, and you go to approach them in a way that's calming to help cultivate that conversation, that compassionate culture, so that they can in a healthy way resolve conflict. The other piece is replacing the language of fear with the language of safety. I was notorious when I had a classroom of threatening, calling out threats. If you don't do this, I'm taking you up to the office. Or if you do this again, I'm calling mom to come pick you up. That is the language of fear. I did not know that. I had no knowledge of that. Didn't realize what the damage that was doing to those children. It was not creating the sense of safety, which is therefore why I didn't have that compassionate culture in my classroom. So replacing that language of fear with the language of safety by saying, you're calm, you are safe, you can handle this. You are having a big moment of upset, a big moment. You're feeling frustrated. You are safe. We can handle this. That's the language of safety. Then number three, the other piece is shifting from judging to noticing. And we'll talk a little bit about that today, just a little bit. And further on down, we'll talk a lot about that when we get into the emotional state of the brain. But just shifting, I always like to say, taking off your judging McGee glasses and seeing the best in a child and seeing the best in in them completely, to know that they are capable. They just may be lacking skills. You can also use this with other adults. I know so many times because I was raised by a fixer, I naturally tend to want to fix people. And I know now, because I'm older and wiser, hopefully wiser. I know that I'm older. The gray definitely shows. But shifting to just kind of noticing that a behavior is a cry for help, and it's not necessarily an irritation, because when we view it as an irritation, our perception is, and we talked about that last session, is that we're sitting in that emotional state of our brain, right? So shifting from judging to noticing, which was like the pre-learning survey, we said, I noticed you picked up the blocks. That was helpful. We're noticing a child, we're noticing it when a child does something, we're acknowledging that the child's done something, and we're encouraging them. We're letting them know that what they did was helpful. Because the more and more we do that, the more willing they're going to want to do acts of kindness. And again, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to cultivate that compassionate culture. The other piece is the wishing well. Wishing well is something that is a lot of times we don't practice because we've never heard it, or we've never seen it, but it looks so different for all ages. But that wish well is simply just placing, for younger kids, we tell them to just kind of place their hands over their heart and just wish that person well, whatever they're going through. All of these skills, and we've kind of built upon this, all these strategies, is like, I can practice this now, even though I don't have a classroom. I can practice it on my kids at home, or I can practice it at work, or some of the teachers that I work with on a daily basis. I'm just going to wish them well and not try to force anything, because anything forced is not real, right? And so we'll talk about that here in a second. I'll show you a video of Dr. Bailey really explaining the power behind that and why that's so important. Developing a healthier way to see behavior, just as I said, taking off the judgy McGee glasses and putting on your love glasses, right? And trying to see the best in someone, seeing the best in their behavior, going, hey, they're doing this as a cry for help. They just need me as their teacher to help them with their skills, right? And help build upon those skills. Again, so they can have lifelong learning, right? We know that when kids feel a part of something, when they feel a sense of belonging, then all of these things come into play. They feel safe, they feel connected, and now they can learn and they're successful. All of these things rolled into one is how we create that school family, or that home family. All of these things you can do at home as well. I wanted to show you a quick video here of Kim Jackson, where she really talks about how she had to do that in her classroom. And so I just want to share that with you, and let me get this on and we will.
That I had in my classroom one year, and I used to have a really hard time connecting with my families. I was very standoffish before conscious discipline. My families were the parents, and the children were the children. But now it's a conscious effort to connect with families the same way that we connect with our children. So I had a family, and my teaching partner and I had noticed that this particular child was coming in the same clothes every day, along with his mother, who was bringing him to school each day. She was also wearing the same clothes. And so I noticed that, and I talked with my teaching partner about it. And so we talked to the family one afternoon and asked them if there was a way that we could be helpful to their family. I had access to some resources in our community, and as fortunate as we were able to provide their family with an apartment that they could afford. We were able to furnish their apartment with furniture, and we were able to help them find clothing. They had a spoon, they had a bowl, they had 3 cups. And it was interesting too, because it goes back to judgment. I remember the first week of school, this particular child, he laid on the floor all the time. Even when it was mealtime, he wanted to eat on the floor. If we had judged the child, we would have approached it in such a different way, rather than just noticing that this was something that was happening. And he wanted to sit on the floor because they had never had furniture in their place before. They had never had anything to sit on. So I will just never forget the mom coming back and talking to me and being so unbelievably grateful that she had a bed. She had never slept in a bed before, and that her children were going to get to sleep in beds, and they were going to, as children, because she did not have a bed as a child. And now she brings the children to school every day. And not only did she bring that child, but she brings her other children who are younger, and they get greetings every morning. And then she gets a greeting as well. And there's just an unbelievable connection with that family, but as well as our other families. So it's just a life lesson for me that I had to be willing to let my wall down and be willing to connect with the families before those kinds of things could happen. But it was only because of conscious discipline that I was able to do that.
So as you can see, Kim Jackson does a beautiful way of just kind of sharing that moment and just kind of capturing how important it is to connect. And once you have that connection established between the home and just being in school in general, I mean, and just the power behind that is just beautiful, because I guarantee it that child, once that connection was made, I mean, that sense of safety was there. So what Kim Jackson did is she understood that. And I love how she said, I had to I accept that. If I had judged the child, then it would have been this way. So just a constant reminder that, man, how important it is to notice and noticing. And we'll break that down here in just a second. So going back to changing our job description, and this is what it looks like. Adults and children, we have a new job description that helps shift our perceptions from seeing behaviors as good or bad, and we're shifting for seeing them as safe or unsafe. So when I mentioned earlier, I want you to change your job description. You just kind of say that out loud. My job is to keep it safe. As the adult, say that with me. My job is to keep it safe. The child's job is, your job is to help keep it safe. By doing that, you're establishing that language of safety. So what does that look like? A child who's in the classroom, who's standing on the chairs and tables, throwing play food all over the place, only because I've seen that here recently. So it's kind of fresh in my mind. If we try to stop the behavior because it's an irritation, and instead of going, that's not safe. So immediately I changed the shift, the language of safety in my head, going, I'm safe. This child's not out to get me. Yes, they are doing something, but I'm not going to let that trigger me. I'm going to download this calm. I'm going to approach this child, make eye contact. I've already told myself my job is to keep it safe. So that's where I'm going to go with that. So what does that look like? I go up to the table where the child is and I say their name. I get them right here and I make eye contact with them and I say, my job is to keep it safe. And your job is to help me keep it safe. And standing on the table, that's not safe. What can we do instead? Or are you wanting to play in the play center and no one's seeing you or listening to you? Let's come down from there and let's work it out. Right. So that just kind of shows you that sense of safety and how receptive children can be to that as you're modeling calm versus get down from there. We don't do that. I hear this a lot. That's not what we do in our classroom. So what is it that you do? So creating that, because we know that kids, and especially younger children, they see things through pictures and maps. So let's map out or picture, paint a picture of what is the expectation for that child or children. So shifting to the language of safety is just an extension of our job description. It teaches us to focus on the behavior we want and relate it back to safety. And we do that by teaching ourselves as the adults that we are in control. We have the power. And when we let go of that power, when we feed into our triggers of a child standing on a table and throwing things, or a child who may be hitting you, and we feed into that trigger and we come at them like this with our clacker, then we aren't cultivating that language of safety. We're not using that language of safety at all. So this star is that reminder for us adults that says, stop, relax. Take a deep breath. I've got this. I've got this. I'm going to use my skills. This child is not out to get me. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to teach because that is my job, right? So this is a reminder. So this is a star that reminds us to stop, take a deep breath, and relax. So I want you real quick to reflect on these two statements, okay? And just kind of see, because I can't engage with you back and forth, I just want to take you to where you can see what this looks like, okay? So here's a common phrase or sentence or a common command that you may hear. An example that I gave you earlier is as you hear a teacher say, no running. What is our rule about running? That's the common statement. The conscious statement should be walk in the classroom so everyone is safe. Do you see in the conscious statement how we shifted it to what? The language of safety. Okay. So if we say, okay, if you were a child in this situation, how would they internalize this information? If we say, no running, what is our rule about running? Then a child internalizes that as, I'm going to run. I have no idea what the rule is about running, because when I hear no running, I hear run, right? Okay. The conscious statement, see, in a child in this situation, they internalize that information as, oh, walking keeps me safe, right? There in turn, you're teaching them the language of safety. Now they know walking will keep me safe. Okay, let's do it. Let's look at another one. Okay, this statement, a common statement, hold my hand so you don't get run over. Okay, remember we said earlier, shifting that language of fear to the language of safety. This common statement right here is not the language of safety, right? This brings the language of fear, that a child is scared to death they're going to get ran over. The conscious statement says, hold my hand. So you model that, hold my hand. I will keep you safe when you cross the street. You see how this shifts to and meets the need of that language of safety. So again, if you were a child in this situation, how would the child internalize the information, right? For the common statement, how they would internalize that is, if I don't hold your hand, I'm going to get ran over. I'm scared to death, right? Boom, there it is. I don't learn anything from that other than I'm going to get ran over. The conscious statement says, okay, holding someone's hand keeps me safe. All right, I'm going to hold your hand. Okay, does everyone see that? So that's shifting, taking a common sentence and shifting it to the conscious statement, so that it meets that language of safety that we've been talking about. Now we're shifting from judgment to noticing, okay? Judgment, number one, is all about us and them, and nobody is safe without judgment, right? So when we think about the Judgy McGee, looking through the eyes of a child, but we're judging them on that behavior, which goes back to what Kim Jackson was referring to in her video, is if we judge the child, then we miss that, right? We miss that opportunity to be there. Number one, specifically this situation, be there for that child and that child's family. Children don't ask to be judged. And I'll be honest with you, we don't either. Even as adults, we want to be noticed. I can look back now. I can think of several times in my classroom that I missed so many opportunities for children to be seen. I went straight to the behavior. I went straight to judging. I was notorious for judging the parent and their return. I don't know if this makes sense, but I would judge the parent for a specific thing or a behavior or something, and it would reflect or have a lot to do with the way I treated the child, which I know is not okay. So just kind of thinking about that in sense is, can you think of a time that you've seen a child or even another adult and you've seen behaviors and you went straight to judging? I'll give you a little snapshot of kind of, you know, I'll never forget, outside of this job, outside of training teachers, I do a lot of training inside work release programming and local detention centers, working with female and male inmates and parents in general. And I'll never forget the time that I was holding a training. And I'll just paint the scene for you. It was a jail. I was in a jail, and I had a kind of a large group. This was before COVID. I had a large group, about 30 participants, and I had already started the class. And there was a gentleman that had come in late to the class, and there was one seat in the front row for him to sit, and it was the only seat that was left. And he had come in really upset about something. So he had became very stressed and triggered by something that had happened outside of the room. And as he comes into the room, he's still kind of venting about it and kind of cuts me off in the middle of the training. And so if I had shifted judgment and judged him for that, then my whole my body language, the way I treated him, would be very judgy. It would be like, how could you come in here and ruin this moment? I'm in the middle of something. How rude could this be? But instead, because now I know the importance and the value of teaching that language safety, and I'm telling you this because this is how you can use this on adults. This was a real thing. And so I stopped for that second. Remember that star, that icon. I breathed into that moment, and I watched his nonverbal cues, right? Because we know that all behavior is purposeful. And I'm watching him. Instead of judging him, I'm noticing him. I'm letting him have his moment, letting him breathe, letting him I have no idea what he's talking about, but he's really upset. I walk over beside him, put my hand on his back, make eye contact with him, and say to him, I'm really glad you're here. And when that moment happened, I always like to say it was the melt like butter situation, where his entire body went from super stressed and tense and tight. How many times have you seen a child do this? Angry, to just relaxed, because someone took time to notice him and not to judge him for his reaction or behavior. So that, in its sense, I'll never forget, and I'll never forget how amazing that was, just to have that connection with him. It was a sense that I got teary-eyed in that moment when that happened, but it was a moment where I could go, hey, I'm with you. You're safe in this room. I don't know what just happened out there, but we've got this. That's the beauty of noticing, right? When we shift from judgment to noticing, that's what that looks like. So really what you want to think about when you think about our hearts, meaning this is part of that wishful piece too. Our hearts put off all of this energy, and that governs the brain. Okay. So if we describe, your energy, think about your energy level when you're in a peaceful state. When you're peaceful, your energy level just seems just kind of calm and relaxed. Whereas when you're upset, it's not so much. You don't seem as relaxed, right? And we know that the brain is pattern seeking. The more patterns we see or hear, whether we're a child or adult, it helps us feel safe, right? And that's at the core of learning. For children, yes, absolutely. When our internal state's peaceful, when we're grateful, I mean, think about times that you've been, peaceful, you've been grateful for things, you've been appreciative for things, you are in a more relaxed, kind of calming wave. Our brain dictates those patterns over time. When we're stressed and anxious, we don't see those patterns. This is true for adults. This is true for children. And thinking about a time that you've seen that was a scenario that I gave you just now, was at a time, even as an adult, when he's stressed and anxious, he could not see those patterns, right? I know for me, on mornings that I've taken time for myself, I'm a morning person. I like to get up before my family, because when I don't do that and I hit the ground running, I do for everyone else, and I lose myself. And the day seems a little bit more anxious and stressed. Whereas if I take time in the morning for myself, I'm in a more peaceful state. I'm more relaxed. I'm more appreciative, grateful for things. And so then I know that I can create that peace, that energy that comes off of me, my heart. And the heart and the brain are connected, and that peaceful, calming state is what helps anybody, whether that's adults or children. So think about children that you've seen that have been like this, or they've come into a classroom. I've seen kids come into classrooms that are just so anxious and stressed because mom or dad are running late for work, and they just kind of shove them through the door. Okay, see you later, bye. And so that's going to create this sense of, I don't really feel safe. So as a teacher, as an educator, we've got to develop right away, go in 110%, creating that sense of safety for that child by picking that child up, putting him in their laps, or giving them a hug, saying, you're safe, you can handle this, come on, let's breathe. Let's start. Do you want to do a pretzel? You want to do a balloon? Let's breathe, right? And so those are ways that you create that sense of safety. And you do that by seeing the best, right? And seeing that this is a child's need for needing that safety, because it may not be given to them at that time. I've been going back and forth just talking a lot about, the importance of a wish well and why that's so important. This is a structure. This picture is a structure of a wish well board that we'll talk about further along through our trainings when we're talking about the emotional state. But I wanted you to see this because we're talking a lot about, we've got to shift from that noticing piece, and we can't do that if we don't practice the wish well. So how do we teach that in our school family? How do we teach that at home? Well, we first teach kids the importance of breathing and how important that is. You've got different icons that you can put up in your classroom that represent different ways or different strategies that they can breathe. When we're wishing well, we're going to put our hands over our hearts and we're going to wish that person well. And so by doing that, what that does is that unites us together. It says to our entire class, our entire school family, our entire home family, that we're not going to judge this person's behavior. If they're upset about something or get angry and they throw something, we're not going to judge that behavior, but we're going to notice that, right? We're going to notice that maybe so-and-so needs a hug, or maybe so-and-so needs a breathing. So I'm going to walk over there because I'm the breathing queen. I'm giving you ideas for your classrooms. My job in the classroom is the breathing queen. So I'm going to go help my friend who's having a hard time, and I'm going to practice breathing. But I can't do that if I'm not in a classroom that has a teacher who understands the importance of noticing in that compassionate culture. Okay. So how we do that is by teaching kids to breathe, and we're teaching the importance of the wish well. This wish well is so cool. Think about let's snapshot back to when you missed school, when you were young. Think about times now when kids are missing school because they have to quarantine for a certain amount of days. And you come back to school, and I know when I was a little kid, it wasn't really a big deal if I came back to school. Nobody really acknowledged that. But I'll tell you, if there was a wish well for me, and my little picture was inside that little heart, then it would make me feel good to know that all my little friends were thinking about me while I was gone. So that's the point of the wish well. It's a structure that you can use in the classroom. And we'll get into that. I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's a really, really neat structure. And I've seen it in classrooms, and it's pretty beautiful to see. It really brings in that sense of connectedness and that sense of love and just belonging that we've been talking about. I want to go back to talking about, the power of noticing and how important that is. And there's no one other, the expert herself, talking about the importance of that. And so I'm going to pull up, if I could here, I'm going to pull up a video of Dr. Bailey talking about how important it is to notice.
We're talking about noticing, and noticing is a skill in conscious discipline that encourages children to make eye contact with you. So it encourages a connection. And in that connection, you get more impulse control and more willingness to be cooperative. So it's a fundamental skill of conscious discipline. We shift from judgment to noticing. So what we do to practice this is we do a little chant. So if I'm doing a staff development, teaching people to notice, we've come up with a little game, because if you practice in a playful situation, there's a chance it can transfer out. If you just try to do it in the moment, then it kind of stays in that moment and doesn't transfer. So it goes like this. We're going to go, hey, hey, Angela. And you guys are going to repeat that. So I go, hey, hey, Angela. You go,
Hey, hey, Angela.
then I'm going to start noticing something that she does with her nonverbal expression. So in this case, she went, I'll go, her head went like this. And then you guys say, her head went like this. And then she went, her eyebrows went up like this. Her eyebrows went up like this. And then I would say, and now it's your turn. And Angela would go, hey, hey, Sue. And we would pass it around. So we can do that. That's a way of practicing noticing. But let's talk a little bit more about it. We're used to judging. We're used to going, that's a good job, Angela. That's a way to go. Great, great work. As opposed to you came in and sat down and got out your book and your pen and you're ready to go. I'm describing what you're doing. And as I'm describing what you're doing, she goes, oh my gosh, she saw me. Me. And at the same time, you look up at me. And I go, yes, there you, not verbally. I go, yeah, there you are. You and me, like this, like this. So we want to practice this. Now, some mistakes we make too is noticing what children wear. Oh, you got new sneakers. Oh, look at you. You got your organizer and you put Bon Jovi all over it or whatever. We're used to noticing stuff. Oh, new glasses. Oh, did you get your braces off? What'd you do with your hair? Something. So we're used to that, but we're not used to saying, you raised up your hand so I knew you needed help. But if I do that, wherever I focus my attention, it tends to focus everybody's attention. And there's a part in the brain that's called neuroplasticity. That means the brain changes wherever your attention is focused. So if I go, you raised your hand, so I knew you need more help, everybody in the classroom kind of goes, focuses on that. I describe it for them, and I've wired everybody's brain in the classroom to raise their hands by neuroplasticity and the mirror neurons. Mirror neurons saying, my body thinks I'm doing it when I see you do it. So this is a phenomenal skill. So let's practice again. So I will go, hey, hey, Paula, and you say, hey, Paula, and I'll go, your lips went like this.
Your lips went like this.
And then you went like this.
Like this.
And then I'd let you have a turn at practicing so that we start seeing this nonverbal. Self-regulation occurs in the right hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere is nonverbal. We want to make self-regulation a left hemisphere job. It's a right hemisphere job, so we have to get good at this. Good coaches are good at that. They go, oh, you held the baseball bat loosely with your fingers, and then you hit it, and you rolled your wrist over just like that. Ball went out way over second base. That's what good coaches do. Or you can have a coach say, hey, good hit, Robert. Good hit, Angela. Which coach would you rather have? Which coach would you rather have? So noticing is a way to help self-regulate, a way to bring that attention and help develop attention and build connection. 3 phenomenal developmental tasks, 1 skill. We just have to practice.
Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and just say I had the opportunity to practice that game, the hey, hey game. And I will tell you that was challenging to do with a group of adults. But like Dr. Bailey said, when you are doing it in a way that's playful, it tends to stick with you, right? And so that neuroplasticity, the brain seeking the pattern, so over time, you continue to do it. So I think in the long run, even though that was silly and playful, it definitely paid off. But just looking in that and just kind of going back to We've got to get to that place where we can notice a child instead of judging them on a certain behavior or whatever we're seeing, right? So when we're looking at developing a healthy view of that behavior, there's two ways of looking at it. A stressful way of looking at behavior judges, like we mentioned earlier, whether it's good or bad. We know a healthy way of looking at behavior judges whether it's safe or unsafe. So we want to shift to that. It's just a reminder to some of the things we've been already talking about is we want to get to that place where we can shift to that healthy behavior going, this is safe or unsafe. Because we know that if it's unsafe, then that's going to create that sense of stress level, that sense of anxiety, that sense of, excuse me, that sense of worry for a child that they don't know what to expect, right? In a way that's, safe or unsafe. So how can we do that? Conscious discipline, again, is notorious for different structures, which is beautiful because they're easily to adapt and to apply in the classroom or at home. So when we're thinking about becoming brain smart, we've talked a lot. We've had now 3 sessions at the end of this session, building on the importance of the brain, that brain knowledge, and how can we apply that. We have talked a lot about, too, the importance of just getting brain ready. And how do we do that even in a classroom setting? We create this brain smart start. I know that brain smart is a great reminder, especially when you're looking at kind of the logo here, conscious discipline. That brain smart start is an opportunity to connect the brain and the heart together. We need this throughout the day. Us adults need brain smart starts for ourselves. So what is a brain smart start? I know I've said it over and over again, but what is it? So we're thinking about it. It brings in a couple of things. It's an activity to unite, number one. So how do we do that in a classroom setting or even at home? We have a chant or we move together. I've mentioned the I love you rituals. These 2 pictures, these 2 icons here, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Peter, Peter, are my personal favorite at home. They are 2 I love you rituals connection rituals that I implemented right away at the home, and they were really catchy. But that just goes to show you start out with an element of connection and you chant together. There are all kinds of videos on the Conscious Discipline website of different classroom chants that you could use. There are ideas all over Pinterest, all over the internet of different class chants that you can do, or school family songs that you could do, that you could use for your unite, number one. The second piece is your activity to connect. So bringing in that cooperation, connection, that eye to eye. I know it's very hard during COVID times to be able to bring in that element of connection, but this is what this does. It brings in, it's an activity to pull the kids together where they can have eye contact, touch, presence in a playful situation. So we unite together as one, have an activity to come together as one. Then we connect. We go one-on-one with each other and do some type of I love you ritual, whatever that may be. 3, we want to disengage our stress. So we want to breathe. We want to bring in these breathing strategies. We want to teach these in the classroom so that when kids are stressed or they need a moment, or even you as the teacher who says, gosh, I really just need to just stop for a second and star, or can we all just pretzel because I'm feeling a little stressed. So that's your third piece in the brain smart. And the 4th piece is that activity to connect, to commit, a commitment. I know the word commitment is scary, but it's a commit to be responsible. It's a commitment. It's our promise. I know the word commitment is big to teach little ones. So I always like to say, instead of teaching them, kind of take it a step further and teach them what the word commitment means. It's our promise, our daily promise. And I think you can see here, it says to keep our eyes open, our listening ears, our mouth, whatever the case may be. And this is our commitment for the day. All 4 of these things we do in the morning or during circle time. We connect, we unite, we come in as one. These are going to help start our day. But here's the other thing. Here's what I've learned is that it's important for me as an adult to have my own brain smart start for myself. So what is that? What's that look like? I want you to think about that. Where are times in your day that you could have a brain smart start for yourself. You know, for me, I mentioned earlier, morning time is good for me. So I do something very similar to this. I have my own kind of personal brain smart start where I have a song or a scripture that unites me. And then I take time to connect, whatever that case may be. And I exercise to disengage that stress, and I commit to the day. So think about that. I want to just give us just a second. How can you incorporate? There's your challenge for the next time. And then when we meet again, well, hopefully it'll be live. We'll talk about what is that for you? What is your brain smart start that gets you throughout your day? Conscious Discipline has tons of resources, CDs, and all kinds of things that really give you different ideas, different songs. The I Love You rituals, they all come with CDs. All of them are now downloadable on your phone to be able to turn this on, and you can create that brain smart start in your home or in your classroom. So think about, how can I apply this? How can I make a brain smart start part of my day? And what part of that day would that be? Or what would it look like? One thing I would like to share with you is just resources, just in general. Here's the picture of the CDs. This Kindness Counts is great for, all of them are great for connection and bringing that connection in. The Feeling Buddies curriculum is also another piece of conscious discipline that's kind of pulled from the Managing Emotional Mayhem book that I have referred to. So this just gives you just an idea. All of these, I believe, now are downloadable, so you don't have to purchase the CD, but these are just different things that you can use in the classroom that are going to bring in or help with that brain smart start. I would highly, highly encourage you all to get your hands on this book. The Creating the School Family book, written by Dr. Bailey, really talks about kind of the things we've been mentioning already, but goes a step further and just kind of breaks down what that's like, creating a school family and what that feels like. If you're real big into book studies, I always encourage, take a group of educators and do this, or as you graduate and you move on to your first job, maybe reading the book so that you can encourage others to create a classroom that is cultivating all of these things that we've talked about. And I really feel I wanted to share that with you today. It's a great resource to use. That really kind of builds on kind of the foundation of why it's so important to have the school family, because without the school family, we can't use any of these skills that we're going to learn. So as we end our session today, and as I mentioned in the Brain Smart Start, we want to commit. We want to commit to something, right? Because even though we're not here physically together, we want to commit to making the world a better place, right? And so are you willing? That's what I want to ask you today. If you are willing, okay? If you're willing, are you willing to let go of seeing the world as good as bad and start to see it as safe or unsafe? Are you willing to shift, right, from judging to noticing? I want you to take a second and just reflect about that. What is it that will help you be successful with this? What's going to help you obtain that? We've talked a lot about just creating that compassionate culture, and that's exactly what we want to do, but that's the foundation, right? I mentioned earlier, there are 7 skills and there are 7 powers. There are so many structures, and you hear all this information. You're like, yes, I can't wait to transform my room, and I'm going to lay out this structure, and I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to create the safe place over here, and everything's going to be beautiful, and it's all going to work. But if you haven't created that sense of school family, where you haven't laid that foundation down and you haven't started with shifting from judging to noticing, then it's not going to work, right? So we've laid the foundation down. We've talked about that brain research in the beginning, shifting from that judging to noticing so that we can go on to learning more skills, right? So if you're willing, let's commit, all right? So say with me, all right? Are you willing? I am willing. Let's shift it. I am willing to let go of seeing the world as good or bad and start to see it as either safe or unsafe. So are you willing to shift from judging to noticing that language of safety so that you can be the best version of you for your children, for the children in your classroom, to cultivate that compassionate culture? In the next session, we're moving on to session 4. We're going to talk about the first, power of conscious discipline, the skill being composure, and the power being the power of perception, meaning that you want to become the person you want others to become. You want to be that person that you want others to become, right? So there's our focus for next session. So I will see you in session 4, and we'll talk about the power of perception and composure.